gap between Bogota today that was inhabited by our ancestors in 1884 is so big that today it is not easy to imagine the time when Chapinero was little more than a hamlet which you could only reach with difficulty, or that for a moment its streets were empty, unrelated to the daily traffic problems without visible possible solutions. And it is a long time since the days when horses' hoofs crashed against the rocks, giving some spontaneous musicality in the empty roads. Even more recently, when there were strange sorts of metallic red worms crammed with passengers going through the city, spreading the quiet roar of their engines as if they were the very blood of the city. Stories have been lost which no one knows. Tram by the 10th Avenue at the end of the 19th century. 1928. This year marks the final disappearance of the cars pulled by mules. At the same time, it was the moment when the first two trams arrived to Bogotá. William Randall requested authorization from the state of Cundinamarca to establish an urban railway. The petition was approved and carried out after 2 years. The first tramway was operated by the Bogota City Railway Company and operated between 1884 and 1910. On December 24, 1884, the route Plaza Bolivar, San Diego was opened by the Real Street, now 7th Avenue, and then by the New Road, now 13th Avenue, finishing in Chapinero. The cost per trip was 2 cents, and the rails were made of wood covered with metal. These new carriages were baptized Nemesius in honor of Mr. Nemesio Camacho, the then manager of the company. The adverse economic conditions experienced between 1914 and 1929 during and following the First World War did not affect the economic conditions of the tram. In fact, that decade was considered the most splendid in its history. Apparently, there were lots of cars assembled in Bogotá. There are documents which explain the assembling of vehicles in workshops in the city. At that time, there were about 30.6 miles of roads. After a flurry of constant pressure and a lack of political will by certain key figures, the tram operation finished abruptly and permanently. On June 30, 1951, the last trams drove through the streets of the capital, while new buses were beginning operations. 2 buses on opposite routes, a new way, 1951. The vacuum left by the sudden absence of the tram was immediately filled by private enterprise. Bogotá became full of buses, which for a large segment of the ruling class were considered more comfortable, practical, and modern. Thus, most of the responsibility for public transport was moved into the private sector. Between 1952 and 1958, however, the city tried to answer the transportation needs of its inhabitants with the creation of the District Transportation Company. By 1954, there were already 15 buses and 83 trolleys that were powered by gasoline, which at first made a considerable difference to both services. For 6 months in 1958, the company, Empresa de Buses de Bogotá DE, operated. The company had 87 diesel buses, 5 petrol ones, and 25 trolleys. The fleet covered the following routes: Las Ferias Las Cruces, Country Club La Fragua, Centro Nariño San Cristóbal, Rio Negro San Isidro, Ospina Pérez Ciudad Universitaria, Puente Aranda 20 de Julio, 12 de Octubre La Ortúa, Barrio Boyacá Quiroga, Fontibón Las Cruces, Centro Nariño San Carlos. Due to the strong financial pressure of the National Federation of Coffee Growers, many signature trolley buses, especially those from Russia, were acquired in exchange for coffee. 2000. Despite criticism, Transmilenio to date has proven to be an innovative means of transport, and it has changed the habits of the citizens in the most recent decade. On December 17th, the administration of Enrique Peñalosa was awarded the tender of the Transmilenio system, based on surveys ordered by the Bogota Development Plan, City Train, signed by the mayor Antanas Mocos. The project was integrated with other strategies, which included the implementation of bike paths and supposedly a first metro line. Nowadays, in Bogota, there are more than 1 million vehicles on the streets. To reduce traffic congestion, there is a vehicle restriction rule called Pico y Placa, which applies to all vehicles, public and private. Pico y Placa means that you cannot drive your car on certain days of the week. This depends on your car number plate. Pico y Placa runs between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. until the 30th of June 2012. If you do not obey the Pico y Placa law, your car will be taken away and then you will have to pay a fine of 257,500 pesos. In the city, there are also strict rules about parking in non-authorized places every day of the week that have to be respected. Bogota's public transport comprises buses, busetas, colectivos, taxis, and the latest edition, the Transmilenio. These vehicles, perhaps 15,000 of them altogether, come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Some are very old and some are very comfortable and modern. That is why there are different prices for each type. In Bogota, there are practically no bus stops, so you have to flag down a bus wherever you are, and the bus or buseta will pick you up right there. But nowadays, on some congested streets, they are implementing bus stops, so the system is more efficient. The buses and busetas run throughout the entire city at a very scary speed, if the traffic allows them.